And we're live. Welcome, everyone. I think we still have a few people trickling in, but I'm really glad to say that we almost have a full house today. Whether you are an architect, a developer, or managing national rollouts for a retail brand, you are in the right room today. I am John Prendergast, and I lead business development and partnerships at Greenlight. And today I'm joined by two people who have spent their careers in the weeds of exactly what we're going to be talking about. First, we have Amanda Cole, who is a resident in-house review lead at Greenlight. Amanda is a highly experienced project architect with deep experience leading large teams through technically complex projects, from commercial interiors to multifamily. She brings the same rigor to how we think about plan review. And then, of course, we have Amy Miles, one of our favorite partners. She is the program manager and permitting lead at PB2. And Amy brings a rare combination of architecture, construction project management, and business development. She's the person you want running your program when you're scaling across markets. Amy, I want to open it up to you just to give you the floor to talk about PB2 and sort of your unique team and overview of what you guys do, because you are positioned differently than a lot of architecture firms that even we work with.
Sure. Thank you, John. Again, my name is Amy Miles. I am the permitting manager and program manager. Like John said, I manage a team of 20 full-time permit coordinators, working with national retail clients to secure permits across the country, including Puerto Rico. So what's different about our firm is that we have a dedicated permitting staff. In most firms, there is a project manager or project architect running the permitting process, which takes a lot of time away from the design and spends a lot more time on the administrative functions of the project. So at PB2, we take all of that from the design team and we are managing that ourselves and letting the design team design.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Amy. I think we're going to come back to this recurring thing, but the big theme is that you guys are unique due to the fact that you have in-house permitting that is supplementing great architecture teams. But wanted to switch it over to Amanda quickly here and talk about, not only yourself, but the team that you're helping build here at Greenlight, and, sort of the intersection between the review team that we have here and your team, the permit ops team as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. As John said, I'm Amanda Cole. I'm one of the review leads here at Greenlight. We have two teams in our operations section. One is the review team handling the review and code compliance aspect of drawings when they come in from our partners. We take a look at everything in advance of the filing. And then our counterparts are the permit team, who are handling sort of the forms and application process, working with the jurisdictions to get all the documentation filed. And we work hand in hand to make the process go as smoothly and as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so we're going to frame sort of why we're here today. And I think we're uniquely positioned to talk about this because we do this on a daily basis. And the frame for today really is building one store is one thing. Building 10 to 200 stores a year across multiple states, multiple jurisdictions, and multiple reviewers, that's an entirely different problem. So let's get into that. Amy, I think before we get into sort of the actual issue, I think it would behoove us to talk about sort of how we met and how our partnership started, working across similar project types. I know you have a good cute meet story of how we started working together.
I do. So we were introduced by one of our national auto parts retailer clients. They had come into several jurisdictions where they've experienced long lead times and different levels of information gathering, and they just needed someone to try to get them over that hump of trying to be as efficient as possible in the permitting process. We were obviously helping with that, but they introduced us to Greenlight and to be honest. I was skeptical at first. I have worked with many so-called permit expediters, but after meeting with the Greenlight team and working with them on this project in Miami-Dade County, I realized that Greenlight is much more than just a permit expediting team. They're a great partner to have to get work done quickly and efficiently.
Great. And I think we actually do have, a visual to go along with sort of the success we had together on this one project. But if we were to talk about this from our perspective, Amy, how did Greenlight actually go about tackling this problem? This is, again, Hialeah, Miami-Dade, Florida, traditionally a very hard jurisdiction to get permits in. From submission to issuance, this was around 30 days. What does our team do, and what do we focus on when going into a project like this in a challenging jurisdiction, Amanda?
I think there were a few things. The first thing is the due diligence that you are also doing up front. My team had also completed that due diligence, so it was just nice to be able to compare and make sure that all of those I's were dotted and T's were crossed before the initial submittal was made. The true game changer, I believe, is the pre-submittal plan review process that goes through you guys. It's just a great way to head off any intake comments or any plan review comments that you have historical information on already, so that we can change those things in the design prior to the submittal and just taking those comments off the board right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Amanda, if you want to just jump in here and talk about how we focus on all projects and sort of what we did on this project to make sure that we have, great results in terms of permit times being quick from submission to issuance.
Yeah, as Amy mentioned, our permit team puts together a roadmap that sort of outlines all the requirements for submission to the jurisdiction. And then in parallel to the completion of all the forms and documentation that we need to prepare in order to go in to the jurisdiction, we're completing this code compliance review that Amy mentioned, and trying to sort of catch anything that might be standing out to us, that a jurisdictional reviewer would pick up. And we're trying to preempt any of those comments so that the actual review process goes as smoothly as possible.
Great. And I think this really gets into the core challenge and why we're here today, which is national scale permitting. This is one project that could have had a 6-month to 9-month permit review time. That could be also a good outcome for some individuals. But this is, again, one project that could take upwards of a year. When we are going into, the 10, 20, 30 different jurisdictions and, trying to scale a brand nationally, what's fundamentally different about building a single location locally versus building multiple prototypes across 30 to 100 different jurisdictions in a year?
I mean, right off the bat, it's a simple, the number of jurisdictions and the amount of variance between code interpretations across those jurisdictions. So the design may stay relatively the same locally, but once you roll that out into a nationwide scale, there are design changes that have to be made and considered based on the interpretations of the different codes in those areas.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, just contending with all of the various intake processes, because no jurisdiction has the same permitting process from beginning to end. They all require different forms, different paperwork, and reviewers have subjectivity. They are looking at, things from their own perspective, and that subjectivity can sort of, lead to, a different style of comments that we would be receiving back from each of those jurisdictions. And, it's part of our responsibility to help to take those and interpret them, bring it back to the design team, and make sure that when we respond to those comments, ultimately, we're getting the best response back in order to close out those comments as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think you hit on this, but there's thousands of jurisdictions. 95% of cities use the same building code, that 5% seems to actually be a really big difference when it comes to actually submitting these permit sets. Why does this change so much jurisdiction to jurisdiction?
I wish I knew, frankly, but I can tell you that it does. I can confirm that in a good example of this is the city of Houston versus Harris County, which Houston is in. The city of Houston has a quite rigorous, very detailed, very difficult, multiple rounds of reviews, comments, review process. But the Harris County, which incorporates the same building codes, is a much smoother process. The intake is completely different. The time reviews are substantially less. So it's just a priority of the different jurisdictions and what they want to review and scrutinize versus what they don't.
Yeah, and I think, Amanda, as someone who is um, looking at this from a state, county, and city perspective every day with projects across all 50 states, how granular does it get with each individual reviewer?
Yeah, I mean, it can get very granular. As far as, Amy's example of the counties in Texas, we also see this in Florida quite a bit where, we'll have to do let's say a town submission and a county jurisdiction. And there are just different requirements that they're looking for. It's all under Florida building code, but Miami-Dade County is going to be looking into very specific things where the town itself may not be looking for those. They look to Miami-Dade and they say they'll review those comments and then we'll look at it afterwards. And they have a different approach. So we sort of have to contend with all of those different things. And yes, down to the individual reviewer, there is a certain amount of code interpretation that we see across the board, and reviewers aren't always consistent.
Yeah, and I think you guys are both uniquely positioned here to have insights on how this actually impacts design and architecture teams. Amanda, as an architect by trade who has worked in multiple facets of actually having to review code on your own, how does this impact, the design process as well as the architecture teams that you guys have either worked with in the past or Amy, you're still working with today?
Yeah, I think when I was doing this from the architect's perspective, there's quite a bit of variability to contend with, and it takes a lot of time to sort of analyze those comments that you might get back from a jurisdiction and then apply it to your project. And I think in the instance of the work that we see now, we're trying to, take the information that we've gathered over time, sort of the jurisdictional knowledge, and help our clients and team members apply that across the board, whether it's more generic comments that we see kind of over and over from different jurisdictions, or comments that we get from specific jurisdictions and can help to say, well, we know you're applying in Miami, or you're applying in Miami-Dade for a permit. These are comments that we see from Miami-Dade all the time, and try and cover those bases.
Yeah. And Amy, I guess if we were to think about this from, a world in which your team did not exist within PB2, and it's just your architectural team, what happens to their workload when revisions stack up across multiple markets?
I mean, it's it's exponentially larger. That, like Amanda said, the time it takes to review the comments and review the codes that are referenced in those comments and formulate responses and gather all of the response documents. It's just a huge amount of time that I think a lot of firms don't necessarily consider when they're planning projects. I think that the permitting oftentimes gets pushed to the side. We'll think about that later. It's at the end of the project, those kinds of things, and it's just not considered early on. And I think that's often to the detriment of projects, and especially, construction timelines and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that is like almost a perfect segue into the next section we wanted to talk about, which is a lot of construction timelines, they just, when people are building these out, they sort of build in abnormally long time for permitting alone. Um, you know, that has a lot of trickle down effect when it comes to the ROI or the return on investment for a lot of these projects. What happens financially when a permit is delayed for one of your clients, Amy?
It's a loss of revenue. It's a simple answer. Most of the clients that we're working with, construction completion means stocks, shelves, and grand openings, and initial profits coming in. And any delays in that due to permitting are direct impacts on the bottom line. And so we always have to be very aware of that and how that impacts the client and what we need to do as early on as possible to try to ensure that that impact is as little as possible.
Yeah. And Amanda, I know we talk about this all the time, but time is money when it comes to our clients' openings. What are you tracking towards when you start a project with a client? Are you working towards their target open date, or is it more so like permit in hand date? Like what are we working towards on a daily basis?
I think it depends on the client. Sometimes we see that, as accurately as we can plan out how long a permit takes to get allows them to be more accurate about their opening dates. They don't have holding costs. They're not paying rent on, spaces that are not able to be occupied because they're not able to do the construction because they don't have a permit. And then, we're trying to make sure that also if for some reason they maybe do have a delay in their work or when they can move in, that we're working with them to sort of adjust when we might be filing for a permit so that it's working in alignment with their teams and making sure that the structure of the timeframes are getting them to where they need to be at the end of the day.
Right. And I think we both have experience in the clients that are doing more than 100 openings in a year, or planning to at least. What happens with those lost weeks when they start to compound across portfolios?
Well, loss in revenue again, and yeah, it's compounding because you're not talking about one store, you're talking about 20 stores that need to open. And that's just exponentially, changing how they can be successful in their openings and start to make money on those projects.
Right. And Amy, what does PB2 do differently to tackle this problem?
Apart from having the dedicated permitting team, that's number one. Number two, I think we have an internal database of projects, jurisdictions, where we keep track of all the permitting information that was needed and gathered for that project, and any design comments, plan review comments that commonly occur in those locations, similar to what Greenlight maintains. So we have those same tools that we are and have been using for quite some time to just make sure that when we initially go out to permit with a project, it is as complete as possible to try to just shorten that review time, reduce the amount of comments, etc.
And if someone at home is watching this and they work at an architecture firm that doesn't have what you have, what are some insights or tips and tricks you could provide for them to adopt?
Start your due diligence research early first, and then reach out to Greenlight. That's going to be my plug. My plug for the day is just to know what you don't know and find an expert who does know and who can help.
Amazing. I love the shameless plug for Greenlight. We appreciate you always. And at home, if you guys are listening right now, I see a lot of questions come in. Please feel free to ask questions throughout all of this. As we transition into the next section, there is a lot of common mistakes, a lot of proactive strategies that could be implemented What are some common mistakes that you see firms making when they are trying to scale nationally?
Um, I think the first one is underestimating staffing. If you are trying to scale and you're using a prototype, that may make it seem easy, and you're just going to cookie cutter these projects out, and it never works that way. So just understanding the volume of projects that you're walking into and planning accordingly with both design staff and, if you have it, permitting staff, to make sure that you're not behind before you even start.
Yeah, that's great. And Amanda, do you have any tips or tricks for proactive strategies that we use at Greenlight on a daily basis, or common pitfalls you see?
Yeah, I think especially for these rollouts that are happening nationally, there can't be an assumption made that each city or jurisdiction is being treated the same way. As we've mentioned before, so many of these jurisdictions have very particular requirements, from, the way that you bundle the drawings together to the way the files are named, and any step of the way where one of those items is not taken care of appropriately can cause delay. And so doing the due diligence, like Amy has said many times, and making sure that the team is clear on all how all of those things need to be filed and done, make sure that you can pass intake in an appropriate amount of time, and that you reduce the rounds of review with your review team. I think another mistake that we see sometimes would be submitting incomplete packages. If you submit only some of the drawings that a jurisdiction requires, or some of the forms, again, you're leading into a scenario where maybe that intake with the jurisdiction is not processed quickly. Maybe you have to go through a couple of rounds. So making sure that all that information is organized in the beginning is extremely important in making sure the process goes smoothly. And the green light strategy is to use a roadmap where we're doing all of that due diligence and calling the jurisdictions in advance to make sure we are extremely clear on how each jurisdiction is looking for those things to be provided. And I think the last thing I would say about that is the hand-in-hand approach in doing a code compliance check before you bring your drawings to a jurisdiction. The jurisdiction shouldn't be used as a compliance check. All of those code compliance items should be, on the drawings as clearly as possible. Reviewers are reviewing tens, hundreds of projects. They want everything to be very clear to them from the get-go. And we find there's probably a little bit of grace given when we have very clear information on the drawings. It's easy for them to find, it's easy for them to check the box and say, this looks good, and they can move us forward and approve a permit.
It's amazing. I feel like you covered just about everything that we talk about on a daily basis really succinctly. So thank you for that. Just transitioning slightly, I think a lot of people on this call are interested in, the role of AI and technology. Amanda, I think you're uniquely positioned to work at a tech-enabled permitting service, and you see this on a daily basis. But how have we solved for these common mistakes with AI tools and a human-in-the-loop review cycle?
Yeah, so we've been trying to integrate AI tools in a number of ways. I think one of the first ways that we do this is through the code compliance intelligence. We have an AI that, can do search through the code books and can answer quick questions that we may have. We also use that same AI to review for sort of the most common things. Let's say, like, is the type of construction shown on the cover sheet? Do we know how tall the building is? The AI can read the plans and see that that information is there or is not there. But the human expertise is essential. We're always the backstop behind the AI, making sure that the information that it has found is accurate. And so the review team here at Greenlight will review and make sure that anything that the AI has checked, we kind of put a second set of eyes on and just make sure. So it is a partner for us in order to make things more efficient and more expeditious as we're going through our code compliance review. I think another great tool that we've been using is our tracking software, which is called Atlas, and it provides visibility into the permit status. So especially for our clients that have many projects, say 10, 50 projects, it's a one-stop shop for them, a place where they can open up, see where all the projects are that they are currently in progress with, and see how the status is for each of those projects. They don't have to go sorting through emails. They don't need to follow up with, checking on things. It's all right there for them. And that's sort of just a way to stay very organized. Yeah.
Amazing. And I think everything Amy and Amanda just walked through is, talking about the variability, the revision cycles, the revenue sitting on the table while you wait. That's the problem that Greenlight and PB2 were built to solve. The way I like to frame things about how we do things, at least internally at Greenlight, is there's three legs to the stool. First, there is a team of experts solely focused on permitting. This is all we do. Second, we have a unique regulatory power through the private plan review. So we can actually step into the process in ways traditional expediters simply can't. And third, obviously, as Amanda just touched on, we have proprietary purpose-built technology that embeds compliance intelligence and gives, teams that are building 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 stores a year, the ability for real-time visibility for the first time. We can go into the sales pitch for Greenlight, but it might make more sense to open this up for let's go into it. Actually, I think that makes the most sense. Amanda, if you would do the honors, you are our official private provider expert here. So
yeah, so another benefit that Greenlight provides is that we can act as a private provider for projects in certain jurisdictions. So private provider laws are fairly new. They exist in a variety of states and local jurisdictions. And generally, what they allow for is a qualified professional to perform plan reviews and assess code compliance for a project. So we're already doing that as part of our process day to day. But in these jurisdictions, it can allow for a shortened review timeline with the jurisdiction. And again, that varies from state to state, from local jurisdiction to local jurisdiction where these laws exist. But it augments the ability to complete the permitting process even faster than, one might expect or might be planning for.
great. I know you touched on this a lot, but it is impressive to see how many people we have here on staff that have 10, 15 plus years of experience as an architect engineer. Do you want to just touch on briefly again, the makeup of our team and sort of why we purpose built a team like this?
Yeah, so we lean into expertise of not only registered architects, professional engineers, but we also work with current and former city building and permit officials, and people who have ICC certification, and just, general, like in many years of experience in their respective trades. So the review leads are backed up by a team of these registered and engineers and architects who are performing that code compliance in their trade. And really they become an extension of the design teams that we work with. We always say we're here to help, we're here to make the process run as smoothly as possible. And that code compliance check is just going to allow for so much more smooth and expeditious permitting. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, and finally, I think one of the greatest benefits of working with Greenlight is the third leg of the stool, which is again technology. We've purpose built our software to not be something that you need to log into and dump information into. It's really just meant to be a tracker or a single source of truth that allows you to see exactly what's going on across all of your projects in every jurisdiction. So if you're building in 50 different states with 50 different local laws, you don't need to worry about how your permit is getting done. You just need to worry about where the permit is in the process. Is it on track, at risk, off track, and then exactly who has the ball, what's going on, and why. And at the end of a couple projects of working with us, we will give you a report, a robust sort of understanding of what's going on across your portfolio and how your partners are playing with Greenlight. So, a great way for us to be able to keep teams that are building across the country on track and have an understanding of exactly what's going on throughout their entire portfolio without having to dig through their inbox for the first time. And I think that's really all we have on the Greenlight pitch side of things. Amy, I wanted to open it up to you. What is going on at PB2 and, how can we shout out the good work that you're doing?
There's always a lot going on here. Our big push is relationships, similar to the relationship we have with Greenlight. We enjoy creating relationships with clients, maintaining those relationships. We do with dozens of national retailers, indoor recreation companies, personal fitness companies. We're working with those groups hand in hand every day and have been for years. We have long-standing relationships, and that's what we like. So we're just working to maintain and start any new relationships. So if that sounds like something that you're looking for, if you're looking for a nationwide rollout of new construction, takeovers, remodels, we would love to talk to you.
Thanks, Amy. You've been a great steward to the Greenlight brand, and we're really happy to continue working with you. Before we, go to any closure call to action moments, I wanted to open up the floor to any questions we have. Camila is sitting here. So Camila, do we have any questions that are coming in? Oh, we got a lot. Okay, so I'm going to pick a few of these and I will open them up to you guys. Okay, so the first one is saying, at what point does it make sense to bring in a permitting partner versus handling this all in-house? Do you guys have a threshold? Is there a magic number? Sorry.
Amy, I think you're on mute.
I don't know how I got there. I don't think there is a limit. I think if the complexity of the project justifies someone who has permitting expertise and can really manage that for you, and again take that workload off of a designer who is there for creative purposes, there to provide design services, then it's worth it for that one project. Where we can both excel, both Greenlight and PB2, is when you scale those up to 10 projects, 50 projects, 100 projects. That's where we really show and prove that we're worth the time and investment that we provide in giving those services above and beyond the standard design.
Yeah, agree with that 100%. You have one project in a challenging jurisdiction, it could be just as necessary to have some assistance as if you have 20 projects that are rolling out in, more standard timeframe jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I think, you guys touched on it, but I think Peter Teachin, one of our lead reviewers here, would be very upset if I didn't drop his age-old adage of no one went to school to, learn how to pull permits. So getting an expert on board early is always a good idea. Okay, we have a bunch of other questions here. I'm going to sift through. I was listening to you guys a little too close. How often do you see the same base code interpreted completely differently between two cities in the same state?
Not completely differently, but certainly there can be variation. Of course, the code is is written to be as clear as possible. But certainly for things like how we apply occupancy calculations to different types of spaces is something that kind of comes up as a discussion point in a variety of different ways. You have a waiting room that maybe somebody thinks is not an occupiable space, but somebody else thinks it should be calculated with a 15 net calculation. And somebody else says, well, it's a business, so we only need 150 square feet per person. So, you can have those dialogues, and certainly we always look to have those conversations with our clients early and understand sort of what their strategy is, and make sure everybody's on the same page about how we'll be presenting that to the jurisdiction so it's as clear as possible.
Great. Another question that came in was, what is the difference between what Greenlight does and a traditional permit expediter? And Amanda, I don't want you to answer this. I want Amy to answer this.
Thank you. I wanted to answer this. So like I said at the beginning, I have a lot of experience with traditional permit expediters, boots on the ground kind of people, especially pre-COVID when things had to be walked in. And those people at that time were helpful in that sense when you needed someone to just deliver drawings. That's not the case as much anymore. And so what I've experienced recently is that a lot of the expediters that we work with are not really doing much to expedite. They are still kind of a boots on the ground mentality. We find that we have done as much due diligence, if not more, than they have on a project. And so it's hard to justify to a client when you are wanting to or needing to use someone like that, or if they hear the word expediter and that's, they're thinking of what Greenlight might do when really what they're getting is nowhere near that level of service. So the plan review, pre-submission, things like that, no one's really doing that, and that's what I think makes it different.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that was a pretty good understanding of the difference between an expediter and Greenlight, but better than what I think a lot of people internally could even do. So thank you, Amy. One of the questions we have here is, can you give an example in Northern Virginia? And I don't know exactly what we're going for there, but I think what could be applicable is that we are actually registered as a private provider in Fairfax County. I don't want to butcher the exact timelines here, but I know Fairfax County traditionally has a very long queue when it comes to opening any sort of space. We are one of 10 reviewers that actually have this capacity. I know that we've worked in a number of locations here. Tyson's Corner, for example, with the Mace Ridge property in Northern Virginia, which falls within Fairfax. And our timelines are around the 14-day mark from submission to issuance without going too far into the weeds here. But yes, there are permit expediting lanes in different areas of Northern Virginia. Okay, some more questions here. Amy, can you explain your approach to outsourcing permitting for a client that has a prototype being built in many different AHJs versus a client that has one-off design build project?
Wow, that's a great question. So I honestly, it doesn't really matter one-off versus a nationwide rollout. The value of the service is the same. The point, again, is opening your doors, creating revenue. And so regardless of the number of locations you're trying to build, the process of getting that permit quicker is helpful. So there's no real difference. It's just obviously the volume of projects is going to affect the bottom dollar amount for fees, but other than that, to me, there is no difference. I would recommend someone like Greenlight for a one-off or a nationwide project rollout.
Amazing. And I think this one is somewhat similar, but Amanda, I'd love for you to answer this question around how do you standardize across markets without losing flexibility for the local requirements? I think we touched on this briefly, but I feel like we do this often. So
Yeah, it's definitely a balance. And part of what we lean on with something like that is sort of our database. You know, Amy mentioned that they collect, you know, comments from certain jurisdictions. We do the same, and we try and find the common threads so that we can cover those. But um, we always want to make sure that we are also leaning into sort of the commonalities that we see in those local requirements, and making sure that we can work with our clients to give them something that is going to work for their prototypes and not stray too far afield.
great. I know we have a few minutes left. I'm going to dig through and see if there's any more questions that we can answer in a minute or two. Um, so how, for a team that already has internal permitting process, how does working with Greenlight actually fit in, Amy?
It's a partnership, a relationship, just like I mentioned before. And again, when we first started this, I wasn't sure how this was going to go, but I realized quickly that we're all moving towards the same endpoint, and we're all trying to work together to do that as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I think that internally, even within my team, it has been a learning curve, but I think it's gone really, really well. I'm not the only person who's interacting with Greenlight on a day-to-day basis. And I think that just the knowing that they're not here to take my job, I think is a really, frankly, the hardest hurdle to cross. And once you realize that it is really truly a partnership and we're all working on the same team, regardless of what the company name is, that's when it really starts to click.
Yeah, I think that's, typically the skepticism turned believer that we love to have. A lot of the firms that we work with, especially when they're introduced from just an architect on that side, architects are typically a little bit skeptical at first to say, I feel like this is going to, encroach on the territory that I am working in, even if permitting is a tertiary aspect of their job at times. Um, so having that being said, I think it is really a great partnership that we've developed between PB2 and Greenlight, and we'd love to continue to do that across other architecture firms. We have one more question here that I am going to handle myself. Pricing has not been discussed yet, but we will send out some emails after this. And if you want to talk through specific projects with either PB2 or Greenlight, we are happy to do that on each occasion. Great. So we're coming up on time. We have 2 minutes left. I think it will behoove us to wrap this up at this point. What I hope everyone is walking away with today is that permitting at scale isn't just a logistics problem. It's really a revenue problem, a design problem, a forecasting problem all at once. Amy showed us what it looks like when an architecture firm builds systems and discipline around that. I think Amanda really showed us what it looks like when a compliance first partner is embedded in that process from the start. And I think the combination of those two things is really a deadly combo that moves the needle. So if you're tired of reactive revision cycles, that was a tongue twister. If you need more predictable path to permitting, or if you just want to understand what private plan review could mean for your pipeline, come talk to us. We're here. We will have follow-ups with everyone who joined, and looking forward to connecting with all of you guys. Amy, thank you again. Amanda, thank you so much. What do you guys want to say before we say goodbye to our lovely cast and crew here?
Thanks everyone for coming. I hope that you learned something and it was a positive interaction as far as giving some hope on permitting and the hurdles that everyone faces and how we can help cross those hurdles.
Great. Well, Amy, Amanda, thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for attending. We will be in touch soon. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.